Hey folks, James Abrenio coming to you from Abrenio Cho. We are a personal injury, medical malpractice, and criminal defense firm in Northern Virginia, based out of Fairfax, but we practice mostly in Northern Virginia. But for serious enough cases, for catastrophic enough injuries, we go throughout the state. In this video, I wanted to address an issue that comes up with most of my personal injury consults. That's car accident cases, that's medical malpractice cases, slip and fall, dog bite cases, really, and I do some sexual assault cases as well. So usually somebody's been injured due to the negligent action of another or due to the intentional act of another. And they say, James, what is the case worth? I saw a case like this in California. Isn't it worth as much as that case? James, I heard that if you just times the medical bills by 3, that's what it's worth. And you get all kinds of things across the gambit as far as how people are evaluating their cases. And they're hoping that I could just give them an answer without having looked at a document, without having looked at a medical record, without having spoken with either a doctor, a medical provider, or a witness. And the truth of it is I really don't know the answer to that. But here's what I typically will tell folks is the way that I think about the value of any claim is I first of all think about what would a jury do if we are successful in this case? And specifically, what would a jury do here in Northern Virginia if that's your jurisdiction? The jurisdiction matters. If you're in California, then what would a California jury do? But if you're in Fairfax or Arlington or Loudoun, I'm thinking, what would a Loudoun County or Fairfax jury do? And I think about that in the context of the entirety of the case as a whole. And so it's unfortunately not going to ever be a situation where I can give a valuation on that first phone call. In fact, for a vast majority of my cases, I'm not going to be able to give a really detailed evaluation, which ultimately we do. We give written evaluations until I've had a chance to digest the entire file, until I've had a chance to really think the case through, until I've had a chance to really help you understand even what your damages are coming away from this case. And then also considering in the aspect of, is there risk to the case, right? Is there a liability issue or is there a causation issue? Liability meaning, can we establish that it's solely the other person's fault? Causation, can we establish that because of that negligence or that act that caused your injury, did they actually cause those injuries? Or is there some other argument the defense is going to have that it's not really a result of this case, but because of something else, for instance, pre-existing conditions? So when I'm evaluating that case and I'm coming up with that value, I have to be thinking about all this stuff. And folks kind of can get frustrated with that because I can't give them the answer right on the phone. But the other thing is I will tell you, when you're talking to lawyers, when you're trying to figure out who you should hire and who's going to be your best advocate, what you don't really want, I can tell you what you definitely do not want, is somebody to just sugarcoat things or try to sell you and try to give you, guidance that's just not just purely speculative and ultimately just to make you feel like you're happy. Because I always tell folks, look, for better or worse, I'd rather you upset with me and frustrated with me at the beginning. If it, let's say, for instance, I tell you, look, this is going to be a very difficult case, or I can't give you a specific answer, and then also be prepared, and I'm preparing you throughout the case, and then be able to get you the result you want rather than just to make you feel good on the front end. And then ultimately in the back end, you're not happy with the result, because that to me is bad lawyering. And it's bad customer service. It's bad client management. It's bad bedside manner. So I'd rather just be straight up with you. So in that, though, I do want to kind of give you a little bit of a framework to be thinking about how I ultimately consider what a jury would do in your particular case. Just to be clear, this is not legal advice as well. You need to, if you have a case you want to talk to me about, call my firm. We can talk about it. If you have legal questions, you need to talk to an attorney. You need to get that specific advice on your case. So with that being said, when I'm thinking about what a jury would do, I think about a few things. And really, the number one thing is what damages can you claim as a result of your case? So let's say you're in medical malpractice and they injure you. What damages you can claim? So under Virginia law, you can claim damages for certain elements: physical injury, long-term consequences of that physical injury, pain, suffering, inconvenience, lost wages, and other economic downturns because of that. So it's not just, and also obviously the medical bills themselves. So when you think about that as a whole, you're thinking about, and I always think foundational, number one is, well, what are the medical bills and the actual treatment and the cost of that treatment? What are the actual injuries that person sustained? So is it a lacerated spleen that required them to have to go in and fix it? Is it paralysis? Is it, a lost leg? What is really the physical damage? How much did it cost to treat them for that? Is there going to be future costs? Let's say somebody needs future care. What is that projected cost? When I'm thinking about pain, suffering, and inconvenience, I'm also helping the client articulate their story about how they were impacted as a result of this case because of the negligence or, again, intentional act of another. Describe to me what the physical pain is. Maybe your family members, friends and family will help us understand what you physically went through as a result of that pain, because oftentimes folks that have suffered devastating injuries either are unconscious or they try to put their mind out of it. What are the physical limitations as a result of that? Can you no longer walk? Can you no longer, maybe you have a brain injury and you can't do the job you used to do, or you can't think the way you used to be able to think. Your personality has changed. So you're thinking about those long-term physical consequences. Okay. The other thing is when it comes to employment, have you lost wages? Let's say, you make $100,000 a year, you have to take off 6 months, and now, so you've lost 50,000 income. Or is it something where, for instance, a brain injury where you no longer can do the job that you used to do, so you have ongoing lost wages? That's something else to think as well. And also, in addition to that, what other consequences are there that are impacting your ability to, let's say you in your life you used to dance and you can no longer dance. You used to do art, you can no longer do art. Those kinds of things. So you want to have a good understanding of that. And again, it's really impossible for an attorney to understand that in like that first initial consult. The other thing to think about is, as I said, maybe this is a medical malpractice case where winning is not guaranteed by any means. We know that even let's say we have an expert that's going to say that the defendant doctor, defendant medical malpractice, the defendant medical provider breached the standard of care, meaning he did not behave the way a reasonable practitioner would behave in Virginia, and therefore you were injured. Usually in medical malpractice cases, the doctors are going to be able to find a doctor to say that they did not breach the standard of care. And so there's a real risk, even if your case is worth $2 million, there's a real risk of losing at trial. So you have to factor in what happens if you lose at trial. Let's say you have a case that's a car crash case, but they're claiming you committed contributory negligence, which would mean you get $0. So let's say you have a case worth $100,000, but you have a 20% chance of losing, right, and getting $0. You have to factor that in to the value of your case. And, you can't just look at, let's say lawyers reporting the values of settlements in the last 6 months or whatever, or you see some news article from New York. It's really does you a disservice to just look at those values and say, okay, my case must be worth this. Because what's going to end up happening is, if you're not able to listen to your attorney and get specific advice on your case, you're going to end up making legal decisions and monetary decisions based upon flawed analysis. And maybe it works out in the end. Maybe you get a great result, but maybe you take a risk you never intended to take because you didn't really think about all this framework that you need to be considering. And then you end up taking a risk and losing. And you didn't realize until after the fact the impact of that risk. So look, I hope that this video is useful in that it explains how complex the analysis of evaluating a case is. And ultimately, hopefully, it allows you really to go in when you're talking to an attorney, or let's say you call us, you call another attorney, and the goal there is, I think, in my mind, if I'm you, if you're someone victim of an injury, or let's say you're a friend or family member, when you're trying to consider what is the case worth, to at least go in with an open mind, to be able to absorb information from the lawyer that you're consulting with, just like the lawyer is trying to absorb information from you. And sometimes the best answer you can get is, look, I don't know the answer to that. We have to look deeper, because oftentimes that actually is the real answer. Because look, the reality is if cases were as easy to evaluate by just looking at a few things, and all of a sudden with that first call, you should know the valuation of the case, then you probably wouldn't be litigating in the first place, because the defendant insurance carrier would be able to look at it and evaluate it. You would be able to evaluate it, and then, you would just negotiate from there. But unfortunately, it's not that simple. And so if you do have your own case and you want to call us to give you an evaluation specific to those facts, certainly want to chat with you. Aware that, again, it's usually a long, drawn out process to consider what the actual value of your case is. So wish you guys the best. Take care and best of luck.